today, meeting the leaders of the US and Japan in Washington. President Park Geun-hye warns North Korea against staging another provocation. The South Korean leader is due to hold a summit with her Chinese counterpart soon. A flyover under construction in eastern India has collapsed, killing more than 20 people and injuring many others. It's thought scores more are trapped under the rubble. Plus, South Korea reports satellite signal disruptions and interference with GPS systems along its border with North Korea. It says Pyongyang is responsible. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Friday, April 1st here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. Let's kick things off with our ongoing extensive coverage of President Park Geun-hye's trip to Washington and the Nuclear Security Summit taking place in the U.S. Capitol. So, the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington is our starting point this morning. Before the summit officially kicks off on Thursday local time, President Park Geun-hye has been holding 4 rounds of sideline talks with the leaders of the US, Japan and China on North Korea's nuclear threats. Let's connect with our presidential office correspondent Song Ji-sun, who's traveling with President Park. So, Ji-sun, 4 rounds of talks in one day, but the president's message to Pyongyang has been strong and consistent throughout.
You're correct, Mark. And our last one-on-one session with Chinese President Xi Jinping is about to start as we speak, as it got delayed an hour due to previous summit talks. In their first meeting since North Korea's 4th nuclear test in January, President Park is likely to call for Beijing's role in halting Pyongyang's nuclear ambitions, with the two sides seeking ways to mutually upgrade their strategic partnership. In the Trilateral talks held earlier with the U.S. and Japan, the 3 countries reaffirmed their consensus on effectively implementing the strongest ever UN Security Council resolution on North Korea after its recent provocations to secure regional security and stability in Northeast Asia. President Park stressed that Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo and the international community will not tolerate more provocations from Pyongyang, and that the regime will face with even stronger sanctions and further international isolation if it refuses to abandon its nuclear ambitions. She also touched upon Seoul's efforts to improve the human rights situation of the North Korean people, saying it is a matter of humanitarian nature. President Obama said the 3 countries are united in their stance toward countering North Korea's nuclear aggressions, and that the 3 countries agreed upon advancing trilateral security cooperation. The 3 leaders also discussed other global issues such as terrorist threats coming from groups like ISIS and as well as tackling climate changes. And now the official programs of Nuclear Security Summit kicks off with reception, followed by working dinner at the White House, hosted by U.S. President Barack Obama, who first proposed and launched this gathering more than 6 years ago. Back to you, Seoul.
So, as we just heard there from Ji-sun, the leaders of South Korea, the US and Japan have held a trilateral summit, the focus of which was the enhancement of cooperation in the face of rising nuclear provocations from North Korea. Our Kim Ji-yeon takes a deeper look.
During her meeting with her U.S. and Japanese counterparts at the Nuclear Security Summit held in Washington on Thursday, South Korean President Park Geun-hye reiterated her stance to firmly stamp down on the rising nuclear provocations from North Korea.
저는 전례 없이 강력한 안보리 대북 제재 결의 2270호가 채택된 만큼 이제 중요한 것은 결의를 철저히 이행해 나감으로써 북한이 핵포기 없이는 생존할 수 없음을 깨닫게 하는 것이라고 봅니다. 한미일 3국은 이를 위해 안보리 결의 이행뿐만 아니라 각국의 독자 대북 제재 조치 시행을 서로 긴밀하게 조율해 가면서 국제사회가 실효적으로 대북 압박을 강화하도록 국제사회와의 연대도 더 한층 강화해 나가기로 하였습니다.
U.S. President Barack Obama said the trilateral ties between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo are united in countering North Korea's nuclear and missile provocations, adding that the three countries have agreed to deepen their cooperation.
We've directed our teams to work diligently in the coming weeks and months to elaborate additional steps that we can take collectively in order to ensure that we have a denuclearized Korean Peninsula and that we can restore a sense of stability and peace to the region, as well as hopefully promoting the kind of opportunities and prosperity for the North Korean people who have been suffering so severely because of human rights abuses in North Korea.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe also acknowledged the importance of the Trilateral alliance against rising North Korean provocations, which he called a threat to international peace and security.
In light of the regional situation faced by the three nations, it is necessary to further promote South Korea-U.S. Japan cooperation in the area of security. Our special concern is the progress of North Korea's nuclear and missile capability, which is a direct and great threat not only to the three countries, but to the global community. In order to jointly respond to such circumstances, we confirm our commitment to strengthen the trilateral cooperation at all levels, which was a major achievement for this meeting.
This is the first time in 2 years that the three leaders hold trilateral talks. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now we're going to go back to the bilateral talks between President Park and US President Barack Obama. We're going to hear more about what was discussed between the two leaders. Here's our Lee Ji-won with a closer look.
During her visit to Washington for the Nuclear Security Summit, President Park held bilateral talks with U.S. President Barack Obama early on Thursday. The two leaders once again emphasized the importance of isolating North Korea by discussing ways to fully implement UN sanctions against Pyongyang and continue strengthening pressure on the regime. Park and Obama also exchanged their opinions on cooperative measures to change Pyongyang's calculated moves to get what it wants by threatening peace on the Korean Peninsula. Amid the regime's continuous violation of sanctions and additional provocations, including firing missiles, the two leaders reaffirmed the cooperation between Seoul and Washington over defense preparation against another nuclear test or other provocations from Pyongyang. There have been conjectures by experts that the regime may be planning a fifth nuclear test, possibly taking place after the South Korea-U.S. joint military drills in late April or before North Korea's Workers' Party Congress on May 7th. This is the first time the two heads of state meet since their last meeting in October last year. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, US President Barack Obama and Chinese President Xi Jinping are holding a one-on-one meeting on the sidelines of the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington. In his opening remarks and flanked by his senior officials, President Obama said the U.S. welcomes the rise of a peaceful, stable and prosperous China, working with Washington to address global challenges like North Korea. He said the two countries were looking to boost cooperation and narrow their differences on North Korea's pursuit of nuclear weapons. Obama said he and President Xi were fully committed to the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and the full implementation of the recent UN sanctions. The US leader said the two sides would discuss how they can discourage nuclear and missile tests in the future. In his opening remarks, President Xi said Beijing wanted to enhance communication and coordination on the North Korea nuclear issue and other regional and global issues, and to consolidate and expand their shared interests. Now, the two leaders are expected to have also discussed the ongoing militarization of the South China Sea, cybersecurity, and China's questionable human rights record. We'll have full details on that summit during our next newscast at noon, Korea time. Now, in the rest of the day's news, a flyover under construction has collapsed in Kolkata, eastern India, killing more than 20 people and injuring at least 70 others. Indian officials say the partially built flyover collapsed suddenly on Thursday. It fell onto traffic and people below, crushing vehicles and trapped more than 100 people.
Because there's a lot of concrete, we're using cutters of all sorts to make holes in the debris so that we can make an entry. Only once we gain entry will the situation of the people trapped become clear.
Now, India's army has deployed dozens of rescue personnel, as you can see there. Lots of medical teams and ambulances, doctors and nurses are also at the scene. The National Disaster Response Force also has several teams at the site of devastation, as you can see there. They've managed to pull scores of people out of the rubble, but getting heavy lifting equipment to that area is proving to be rather difficult. Now, construction of this flyover began in 2009, but such projects in India have often been plagued by poor adherence to safety standards. South Korea has issued a warning against GPS disruptions in the country's northern regions, saying they appear to have come from North Korea. This all comes amid news that Pyongyang may be beefing up its surveillance along the border with the south. Daniel Che has the details.
South Korea issued a warning against GPS disruptions Thursday evening on Seoul, Incheon, and the surrounding Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces. A South Korean official told local media outlets that the North have been sending the GPS disruptions to the country's capital area since last month, and they reached their highest on Thursday. The authorities say this may be because North Korea is currently sending actual GPS disruption attacks to the south upon completion of a testing phase. As of Thursday 9 p.m. local time, there have been no damage reports from the South Korean military on its equipment due to the disturbance. The move from the north follows as the regime has been allegedly beefing up its military presence along the tensions-prone border with South Korea since the end of last year. An anonymous South Korean military official told local media outlets that North Korea has set up some 200 more observation posts. The meters-high North Korean concrete structures could hold 1 or 2 soldiers and surveil the demilitarized zone area through telescopes. The move from Pyongyang is seen as a measure to pressure Seoul's military and gain the upper hand along the border. But there are also speculations that the North is trying to increase its surveillance for its internal interests, such as preventing its own people from defecting the state by crossing the border to the south. Daniel Che, Arirang News.
Now, over 1 million Chinese soldiers who fought alongside North Korean troops during the Korean War. Thousands of them were killed, of course, during the conflict, and many are still on South Korean soil to this day. However, in recent years, Seoul has sent hundreds of soldiers back home, and it flew a few dozen more back on Thursday. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
A Chinese flag covers the caskets. After a moment of silence, the caskets are loaded onto a plane bound for China. It's all part of a repatriation ceremony for 36 Chinese soldiers who were killed in action during the 1950 to 1953 Korean War. Finally, their wish to return home will come true. It's the third repatriation of Chinese soldiers since an agreement on the matter was reached by Korea and China in 2014. Since then, the remains of 505 Chinese soldiers have been repatriated. The ceremony at Incheon Airport on Thursday was held with Korea's Vice Defense Minister and China's Vice Minister of Civil Affairs in attendance.
This is a token of strategic cooperation between Korea and China, as well as a token of peace in Northeast Asia.
Korea-China relations will improve. We will continue to strengthen our relationship.
This was the first time the Korean military conducted DNA identification tests on the remains, following criticism last year that previous repatriated remains were from people not of Chinese descent. Over 1.3 million Chinese soldiers fought in the Korean War, and it's estimated the remains of 110,000 are still buried in South Korea. The remains sent back on Thursday will be interred at a national cemetery in Liaoning, a province in China that borders North Korea and the West Sea. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
South Korea's Constitutional Court has rejected a challenge to the country's ban on the sex trade, handing a defeat to those who have campaigned for years to decriminalize prostitution. But the court was more divided than before. For more on the ruling that has stirred controversy here in the nation, Ji Myung-gil reports.
Korea's Constitutional Court upheld a law that toughened punishment on voluntary prostitutes and their clients, as well as procurers. 6 judges ruled that the anti-prostitution law was constitutional, while 3 ruled the law unconstitutional. The anti-prostitution law was brought before the Constitutional Court in 2012 after a woman who was indicted for having sex in exchange for money asked that the matter be reviewed by the High Court. Under the law, it is a criminal offense to voluntarily sell or buy sexual services, which can carry up to 1 year in prison or be fined up to $2,600. But for those who are forced into prostitution, they are ruled out from the punishment. In a court statement, the Constitutional Court said voluntary prostitution could violate the prostitute's autonomy and fuel explosive growth in sex trade. Therefore, the government could deny such individual rights to prevent exploitation and protect moral values. The court also said the numbers of brothels and sex workers have been on the decline since prostitution has been criminally punished. However, judges who oppose the law said that even if prostitutes become voluntary sex workers, they should be protected and guided by society and not be criminally punished. They also added the law has prompted a thriving underground sex industry. Since the anti-prostitution law was first legislated in 2004, 7 cases have been brought to the High Court. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
The Korean government has unveiled 10 graphic images that will be displayed on cigarette packages by the end of the year. They include images of smokers that have paid the price for lighting up over the years. Kim Mok-yeon reports.
The Korean government on Thursday revealed 10 graphic images showing the side effects of smoking that must be displayed on cigarette packages starting the end of this year. The Ministry of Health and Welfare decided on 10 draft cigarette warning messages at a meeting today in central Seoul, which includes a diseased lung, a hole in a throat, and rotten teeth.
We chose the pictures based on medical grounds and case studies. We try to focus on the facts, whether the diseases depicted on the pictures are directly related to smoking.
The ministry plans to submit the final list of selected images by June 23rd, and cigarette manufacturers are required to use the images on their products from December 23rd. Images must occupy more than 30% of the front and back of packaging, and cigarette companies have to change the pictures every 18 months. Such moves come as a revised health law came into effect last year, requiring tobacco companies to display stronger warning messages and pictures on their products. Over 80 countries around the world have adopted cigarette package warnings, with the number expected to hover above 100 by the end of 2016. Canada was the first to adopt the policy in 2001, using 16 images that cover almost 75% of the package. It said the likelihood of a person becoming a smoker decreased by 12.5%. Australia has participated since 2006, displaying warning images that cover up to 90% of the package. The move motivated 57% of smokers in Australia to try and quit, with 34% quitting successfully. Brazil also found 67% of its smokers quit after displaying warning images. With many countries adopting stricter measures to reduce smoking rates, experts question if the new law in Korea would be effective and sufficient enough to bring about change. Kim Mok-yeon, Arirang News.
For a quarter of a century now, Korea's official aid agency has supported developing countries in health, education, governance, rural development and more. Marking its 25th anniversary, the Korea International Cooperation Agency held a forum on its new 5-year initiative, Better Life for Girls, which was commissioned by President Park Geun-hye last year. Oh Se-young with the details.
More than 40 million girls under the age of 18 around the world see their hopes and dreams come to an abrupt end on the day of their wedding. That is, a wedding against their will, as forced marriage is still prevalent in developing countries, affecting millions of young girls, according to a report by UNICEF. preventing other young girls from enduring a similar fate and defending their right to a brighter future. That's what Korea aims to do over the next 5 years as one of its foreign aid initiatives called Better Life for Girls. The initiative was commissioned last year by President Park Geun-hye as one of Korea's flagship projects in achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And KOICA, or the Korea International Cooperation Agency, marking its 25th anniversary on Thursday, held a forum to share and discuss its action plan to carry out the mission.
We seek to empower girls as future mothers, leaders and independent women. We'll apply female capacity-building programs that our country built up from experience during its years of modernization.
The government will also provide sanitation facilities, health services and education on hygiene and reproduction, all catered to a young woman's needs, to foster a healthy learning environment. In addition, vocational training courses will cover everything from elementary computer skills to specialised techniques by industry.
To differentiate this initiative from past projects, we must first analyze the main industries of the local market and its labour demands.
Through the Better Life for Girls initiative, Korea will invest $200 million across 15 developing countries in efforts to secure the rights of young women to health, education and profession. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Well, those are stories we've been following on this Friday morning here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out the website arirang.com/news. We also have a smartphone application. You can find it by searching for Arirang TV in your app store. We'll be back with our next newscast at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.